of your time, I'd like to ask Ms. Linda Kasonde, who's the chairperson of the Oasis Forum and the president of the Law Association of Zambia, to give us her welcome remarks. Ms. Kasonde, please.
It's a pleasure to have you this evening. We're so honored to see that there's a room full of people waiting to talk about issues relating to the nation. The Oasis Forum, as you know, is a civil society coalition made up of the Law Association of Zambia, NGOCC, CCZ, and ZCCV, the Catholic Secretariat. And we formed the coalition to promote and protect the rule of law, good governance, social justice, and constitutionalism in Zambia. And this is one of the initiatives that we've come up with in order to discuss and throw it really to the public as to what people think about the state of the nation. The topic for today is Zambia in crisis? And really we're looking at what is the state of our nation politically, economically, and socially. Are we faring well? If not, what can we do about it? And we thought as a coalition, as the Oasis Forum, we'd provoke the debate amongst the public. Today we're very delighted to have Prime TV record and subsequently broadcast our event. And we hope that all of you will take the opportunity to also tweet under the hashtag Zambia in Crisis. I'd just also like to thank the speakers and the moderator who have spared their time to participate in this event today. We hope that you all enjoy it, and we hope that you will all be engaged in the discussion. So thank you very much for coming, and we hope that this will be a successful event. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Linda. So the focus here is Zambia in crisis, economically, politically, or socially? So I would now like to call upon Dr. Sishua, I almost said times two, to come and give his opening arguments for the motion. May you please clap for him.
Question for today is Zambia in a crisis. Looks very simple, and it can be answered with one word, yes or no, and then we'll all go back where we come from. But it's actually far more complicated than that. It demands us to ask sub-questions. What is a crisis? And if we agree subsequently that yes, we are in a crisis or we are not, but especially if we agree that there's a crisis, then the other question is crisis for who? Because in any crisis, there are people who benefit from that status quo and those who seek to dismantle it. Now, it's almost impossible to have a broadly acceptable definition of the word crisis. And I think that the easiest way of escaping a dispute around that term is to limit ourselves to the context or specificity of the Zambian case. In the case of Zimbabwe, for example, where that term assumes prominent expression, especially in recent years, until the fall of Robert Mugabe, the term crisis was deployed to mean two things mainly. It referred to the collapse of the economic system, largely due to mismanagement of ZANU-PF, and the economic structure of that country. But it also spoke to the kind of disorganized and, in my view, reckless land redistribution program which was related to the collapse of the economy in many ways. And the deterioration in the national democratic institutions, including the uselessness, if you like, of elections and the disregard for the constitutional order. Depending on who you spoke to, they didn't see the situation as a crisis, or they did. Where the opposition and civil society saw a crisis emanating from the manner in which the land reform program was carried out, the supporters of the ruling ZANU-PF saw an attempt to correct historical imbalances in the nature and structure of the economy or the economic relations, signifying the tension or the dispute between that term, crisis. Does that apply to Zambia? I'm sure yes and no will be the response, even from the audience. And so what I want to do is to ask that we simply define crisis for the purpose of this discussion as a sustained and intense period of difficulty. And if we accept that definition, then we have to also say what are the elements of crisis to which then we can speak in addressing the question of intense and protracted difficulty. I think that Zambia is in a crisis for two fundamental reasons. So you do take it from there then that I'm agreeing to the question that yes, we are in a crisis. We are in a crisis, one, because the economy of the country, the national economy, is no longer able to sustain the life of the majority of its people, who usually are the working class and the rural population, who mostly survive on agriculture. The social manifestations of crisis at this level are extreme mass poverty, widespread national unemployment. And by unemployment, we mean the structural, the systemic, and absolute unemployment. It also denotes, in terms of the key features, extreme inequalities, characterized by the fact or the situation where a tiny segment of our national population, about 10%, gobble up a huge or large share of the national income. The rest of the population, nearly half, are left to fight for the Black Mountain. Very tiny part of the remains. Now, in real terms, these statistics mean something else, actually. It may be better when we leave it at that, but when you go to the real terms, you are talking about 70% of the population living in abject poverty. These are official statistics produced by our government, and the institutions that represent the government. It also means 60% of our population is unemployed. It also means the government, in order to sustain itself, consistently borrows more than the income that it collects through taxes.
Thank you. You can tell that Doc was ready to defend his motion, and he's supporting the motion that Zambia is in a crisis, basically using, I'll summarize, 2 points of evidence. Number one, he's saying that Zambia is in a crisis because the national economy cannot sustain the lives of the majority of its citizens. These are the working class and the majority farming population in the rural areas. Secondly, he's saying public institutions in charge of running public affairs and maintaining the state apparatus have deteriorated over time. He gave examples: the judiciary, people have less confidence in the judiciary, CSOs, I think that challenge is timely, either co-opted or silenced, the media are no longer free, even those who claim to be privately owned, and that political divisions have become protracted, especially from the ethnic perspective. He concludes by saying, this crisis has not started today, but what has changed is the intensity or degree of the crisis. To resolve this, we need to change the structure of the economy, and we need strategic political leadership. Have I captured you correctly? Okay. So that was the motion in support, the arguments in support of the motion. We now call upon Mr. Antonio Mwanza, and Mr. Mwanza is here to argue against the notion that Zambia is in crisis. Mr. Mwanza.
Thank you very much. First of all, I'd like to sincerely apologize to the organizers and everybody that is here that I came late. We had a crisis in town, so we were forced to abandon our car. So we started walking. We jumped in another taxi. We found it had a slow puncture and it had no gas. We abandoned it. We started walking until we came here. Thank you so much for your patience. When I was listening to the doc,
Mr. Mwanza is protected and is talking from experience because I've known him as a debater. So I have learned one thing. Let's go beyond the crisis.
Thank you so much. When I was listening to the doc speak, it was very clear that he doesn't understand what is obtaining on the ground. And I do understand because he rarely stays in Zambia. That's to begin with. Secondly, it is very clear that when I was listening to him, it was sounding more like the PR for an opposition political party. That's secondly. Now, here are the facts. Let's start with the issue of cabinet. I was taking his points. He says that the cabinet of President Edgar Lungu does not include Tongans. And I have a problem with this line of thought where political appointments and professional appointments are viewed with the lenses of tribe. Because that is extremely wrong. It is against our values, our norms, and principles as a nation. When a president is making appointments, he takes into consideration the following things. Number one, the competency, the experience, and the relevance of the skills that an individual who is being given a job has. The president doesn't look at the tribe of a person when making political appointments. If you want to reduce this country...
Please we agreed, I don't know what time the others came, we agreed, can we keep our emotions and our reactions aside? Let us exercise tolerance and patience.
Actually, we have a crisis here
So
because
I give Antonio another half a minute for interrupting you. Please, if we keep interrupting, then you won't be able to communicate. Exactly the way we behaved when Doc was speaking is the way I expect all of us to behave now. Starting now. Thank you.
Thank you.
Continue.
So the president doesn't take into consideration where you're coming from. He doesn't take into consideration your tribe. Because taking into consideration your tribe and where you're coming from is actually against the virtues of our country. Because if you read our constitution, it is very clear that you cannot make appointments based on tribe. That's number one, and it should be very clear. Secondly, sir, for your information, we have a Tonga in cabinet. His name is Dr. Hamkale. But we also have an experience. The constitution clearly states that the president shall appoint members of parliament, appoint cabinet ministers from among members of parliament. And we have an experience where the president last time appointed 3 members of the UPND as cabinet ministers. Honorable Rayford Monde, Honorable Kafaya, Honorable Siamunene. What happened to these individuals when they were appointed by the president? They were expelled from UPND. That's a crisis. They were expelled from UPND. So we have an experience that anybody who is given a job to work with the Patriotic Front is victimized if he's picked from the UPND. He talked about agriculture. Yes, sir. 85% of our people depend on agriculture. And for far too long, they have depended on a hoe and an axe. And this government has demonstrated not only willingness, but commitment to ensure that we improve our agriculture. And this is what they have done. In 2015-2016 farming season, only 241,000 farmers had access to the e-voucher. They had access to the Farmer Input Support Program by the state. As we are speaking now, that number has doubled from 241,000 people that had access to Farmer Input Support Program. This season, this government has given out 758,000 farmers farming inputs. That is a commitment that government is working extremely hard to improve the agriculture sector. We have, in the past budgets, put over $100 million to improve water reticulation, to ensure that we also invest in irrigation. We have trained more agriculture extension officers in the last 7 years than any other period since independence in 1964. That is a commitment to agriculture. We have diversified from just depending on maize to other crops. And farmers are able now to go and get a pack of seed for beans, for sunflower, and for other crops. We are investing in agriculture. He talked about the land policy. This government has committed itself to address the issues of land. And we are speaking right now. The Minister of Lands, Honorable Jean Kapata, is engaging with all stakeholders, the church, the civil society, the civic leaders, as well as the chiefs, in ensuring that we come up with a land policy that is reflective to the demands of the people, that is reflective to the wishes of the people. That is a commitment by this government, demonstrated by actions and not words. He spoke about the presidential petition. The presidential petition was very clear because it says the difficulties we have are stemming from the presidential petition. The constitution of this country is extremely clear, and it is applied to everybody equally, irrespective of your political party. The UPND lost the 2016 general elections. They petitioned in line with the constitutional provisions. They were given 14 days in line with the constitutional provisions. They failed to produce evidence, they failed to produce witnesses, and the Constitutional Court delivered that that petition was thrown out on technicality of the number of days. And the ruling of the Constitutional Court is a public document which anyone can pick and read. It is not our fault that UPND failed to defend their allegations that the election was stolen. It is not our fault that they failed to produce witnesses. It is not our fault that they failed to produce evidence. They had 10 companies representing them, a number of well-seasoned lawyers, and they failed because there was no evidence. It is not our fault. And we cannot be held accountable for what UPND failed to do. He talks about divisions. This government and this president, President Edgar Lungu, has demonstrated leadership, willingness, humility to ensure that this country is united under the symbolic motto of one Zambia, one nation. And he has made sure that in our day-to-day living, the motto of one Zambia, one nation is lifted up. This is a president who has gone ahead to appoint a minister in charge of national guidance in relation to the values and principles that we have enshrined in the preamble of our Constitution. Freedom for human rights, freedom for equality, respect for all, including those that you do not agree with. This president has allowed international institutions, such as the Commonwealth. Professor Gambara has been in and out of this country, talking to the political leadership, the church, the civil society, in order to ensure that we dialogue and agree on the matters that divide us. Not only that, this is a government and a president who has committed to dialogue by financing the Zambia Center for Inter-Party Dialogue, a platform where all political parties, including the UPND and Nashalaneka parties, belong to. And they sit on the table and negotiate. And this government has financed the Zambia Center for Inter-Party Dialogue to do its work. So if somebody wants to talk about dialogue, wants to talk about divisions, those divisions are created by those that have made it a point that they will fight President Edgar Lungu and the PF government based on lies, malice, and propaganda. And we cannot stop them. We can't stop them.
I would say that Zambia is facing a crisis of accountability, and it is actually the biggest crisis that the country is facing. And this is because, to a large extent, those that are in office seem to routinely make decisions for their own self-interest. So you get the sense that those in power are motivated, first of all, by holding on to power for power's own sake, and then by accumulating benefits for their own persons. And so to a large extent, when if you close your eyes and listen to those in power on any given day, you might think that Zambia right now is doing very well socially and in service delivery. Now, I'll give you one example that maybe particularly bothers me. It is a question of education. So in this country, the majority children go to schools in which they sit 120 to a classroom. Unlikely any of us sitting in here, but if you go to any township, you will find that children are 120 to a classroom. The teacher does not arrive. Maybe there are no toilets. And that child sitting in that class is expected maybe to write the same exam as my child, who goes to a school in which there are 30 to a class. The teacher has never missed school from grade 1 to grade 7, and if they do, what will then happen? There'll be a teacher replacement. It is a crisis that nobody in government ever thinks to ask the question, how is the child at Kalingalinga Primary School in grade 7 writing the same exam as the child at Lake Road and having the same pass mark? But you will not hear these questions asked. Why? It's because those in power talk to us about power itself. So we know more about 2021 than we know about education. We know more about 2021 than we know about the fact that if you go to Levi Mwanawasa Hospital right now, I go there a lot, chances are you won't find medicine or you sleep on the floor. It is these issues that should be spoken about if there was accountability. Now, of course, you might blame those in power for the absence of accountability. What I would say is that the crisis in the country is more one of the citizens. I think we've reached a stage where the citizens have a very flawed understanding of their relationship with power. So those in power have become benefactors. Mother Teresa, they are kind to us. We have forgotten, or maybe we do not understand, that they manage a shared resource. And their most important role and their most important duty is to manage that resource so that the poorest Zambians, the weakest Zambian, has a minimum standard of living. So no, I'm not asking for iPads for children at Kalingalinga Primary. All I'm saying is that there should be at least 40 to a class, and that maybe they should have a desk. But the citizens are not angry enough to see how there is no accountability. So it's a case of sitting there and a bird creating a nest in your head, doing whatever it likes, and wanting it to stop. So the crisis of accountability is not only one of civil society. It is one in which civil society actors like myself and my organization speak on behalf of the majority. But nobody fears us. Nobody cares. Because my vote translates to nothing, one, but also one person can be arrested, one person can be harassed, one person can be bought. You cannot buy a critical mass. So what we need is, in this country is for the general public to become so angry about their everyday lives. Not about who is in power, but about what they are doing in power. Because that is what accountability is. Accountability is what are you doing with the power we have given to you. So if you listen to what we heard this evening, we heard, for example, Mr. Mwanza trying to convince us that life is good in Zambia. Now, I don't know which side. Okay. So I suppose I'll agree that on the side of the road that I live, life is not bad. All right? So, yes, if I fall ill, I possibly can afford to go to a private hospital. I possibly, maybe my children went to good schools. My son can probably, at this point, get a job that someone who's better qualified than him deserves because he's more articulate, because of the school he went to. If you're speaking for me, yes, life is good. But let's speak for the majority Zambians, because it is there that accountability matters. When someone who's speaking for government stands up, they need to stand up and ask their question, what is life like? For the people we saw on Prime News not too long ago in John Leng, in which fecal matter is flowing into homes. Fecal matter, garbage is flowing into homes. Nobody says anything. If I switch on the TV tonight, I'll hear again about 2021. What is 2021? 2021 is everybody fighting in order to keep sharing these resources that Dr. Sue was talking about, the small percentage sharing the resources. So when I talk about accountability, it is to say that we have a situation in which those in power do not think they have to account to the majority, and they do not account to them. But worse still, those that should be accounted to treat those in power like if they were ever going to account to them, it would be a favor. So people dance for wells. People dance for wells that get dry anyway in summer. Look at the roads that we have right now. All right. So we have a situation in which I would say that those that are holding our power, those that are managing our resources can very easily put a tarmac that is like Cobra, knowing very well that in a few years' time, that will have potholes because nobody is going to ask questions. So finally, what I would say is that the only way accountability is going to change, the only way those in power will stop talking to us the way Antonio spoke to us today, is if the large majority get angry. And I mean angry. Angry enough to say no more. The poor, we need to begin to worry about the poor people in this country, not me. I can jump on a plane and leave. So accountability is about what happens to that person who cannot fight back.
Thank you very much.
The question I'm responding to, of course, is around corruption. Please remind me if I get carried away, Dr. Msamba, if my 10 minutes are up. The first thing is quite basic. How are we faring with regards to the corruption situation in Zambia? I would like to respond to that question by giving you a couple of statistics. I think it's just last week that we were launching the Corruption Perception Index for 2017. But allow me to take you a little bit back, maybe 5 years down the line. In 2012, Zambia scored 37 points out of a possible 100. In terms of scoring, the Corruption Perception Index is given a score of 0 to 100. 100 being the highest score, and this means that the countries are performing well. That means that they are very clean, there's no corruption. And getting closer to 0, it means you're performing very badly. So out of a possible 100 in 2012, Zambia had a score of 37. In 2013, Zambia had a score of 38, and it maintained the score of 38 up to 2016. So that is 2013, 2014, 2015, 2016. Zambia maintained the score of 38 points out of a possible 100. So that told you that we were not improving. In 2017, Zambia had a score of 37 points out of a possible 100 points. In terms of ranking, there were 180 countries that were surveyed and included in the Corruption Perception Index. In 2016, Zambia was ranked as it was 87th. But in 2017, Zambia was ranked 96th. So basically that tells you that we have dropped 9 points in terms of global rankings, in terms of our performance. On the regional level, in 2016, Zambia was ranked 12th. In 2017, we were ranked 15th. Again, that tells you that we dropped 3 points regionally. So in terms of how we are faring, the statistics are there to answer for themselves, I'm sure. We are not doing so well in terms of corruption, and this is hardly a surprise considering the corruption allegations that came forth in the year 2017. But maybe just to explain a little bit that the 2017 Corruption Perception Index went a little bit further to triangulate the relationship between corruption and democratic space. I'm going to speak to a few things that my brother Antonio Monza spoke to. So what we did as Transparency International as a movement was to look at the relationship between freedom of expression, media freedoms, as well as civil society participation. And this was looked at for a period of 5 years from 2012 to 2017. You find that where freedom of expression is concerned, Zambia has dropped -6 points. Where media freedoms are concerned, press freedoms, Zambia has dropped -8.55 points. Where civil society participation is concerned, Zambia has dropped -13.9 points. Yeah. So basically, this is the situation. And if you look at the narrative, you find that those countries that are ranking at the bottom of the Corruption Perception Index, there is less freedom of expression, there are less media freedoms, and there is less civil society participation. If you look at the countries that are doing well, that are performing well in the Corruption Perception Index, you find that they have more freedom of expression, more media freedoms, as well as more civil society participation. So there is a direct relationship there. So I just thought I should mention that. Our situation is deteriorating, and that means that we really need to do something about it. I know I'm running out of time, so allow me to go to the follow-up question to say, what can we do in terms of curbing corruption? I think the first thing that we need to do is to move from the mere rhetoric, the political rhetoric around fighting corruption, to demonstrable action when it comes to fighting corruption. I would like to, and maybe I should mention that I'm glad that we are graced by the the presence of Mr. Amos Chanda here. We know he has the ear of the president. Maybe some of these messages can get to the president. We would like to commend the president that every year he comes for the UN World Anti-Corruption Day. It makes very correct political pronouncements on the fight against corruption. Do those translate into tangible action? No. We have not seen anything, because if something was being done, we expected these statistics to change. We expected the reports of the Auditor General's office to improve. We expect reports that come from the Financial Intelligence Center to improve. But all those things are not happening. So we need to move from the political rhetoric around the fight against corruption to demonstrable action. If the president today can crack his whip, there are people that superintend over these institutions, public institutions, where all this mischief when it comes to public resources, comes from. If he says, I don't want to see this kind of nonsense next year, otherwise heads will roll, and that comes out and really heads roll, then people will stop doing what they're doing. We talk about issues of corruption. It's not just bribery. For us, we are very concerned about issues of grand corruption, which involve abuse of authority and power. And we have been talking to the Anti-Corruption Commission. They need to be strengthened in terms of the way they operate. And we have been telling them that you need to be focusing on people that are in decision-making positions. Authority can only be abused by someone who has it. And those are the issues that form, grand corruption. So in terms of what we should do, we need to strengthen our systems. By systems, of course, I'm talking about our legal, policy, and institutional frameworks. We want to see improvement in the structures, in the processes. When we talk about administrative arrangements, we want to see these things improve. There are certain pieces of legislation that need to be to be strengthened. And I'm glad that the Public Finance Management Act, the Zambia, or rather the Public Procurement Act, and other related pieces of legislation are in the process of being amended. But is it enough to have these systemic changes? No. It has to be coupled with a change in practice, a change in attitudes, because there are certain regulations, certain administrative arrangements that tell you not to do something, but people still go ahead and do it. So in terms of curbing corruption, we need to ensure that we put in place deterrent mechanisms. I'll give you an example of why our system is not deterrent enough. This is a public case. Henry Kapoko embezzled funds from the Ministry of Health. The case took 9 years in court, and when he was convicted, he was sentenced to 2 years in prison. Now, where am I coming from with that? Every government draws its mandate to govern on the understanding that they are going to help the citizens fulfill and enjoy their rights by making sure that they provide the basic services for people to meet their basic human needs, public services. We are talking health, we're talking education, we're talking shelter, for you to be able to enjoy your rights. So people that pay for public resources that are meant towards public services such as health, they are indirectly infringing on other people's rights. When it comes to health, extreme cases lead to death. They are denying people the right to life. And here is someone, a criminal who you know, has embezzled funds, and then you take through our funny judicial system, and you sentence them to 2 years in prison. What is going to stop the next person from doing the same? because they will come out of prison and continue living like a king on stolen public resources. And we do not demonize such criminals as Zambians. These are the people that we celebrate, and they are setting wrong examples in our communities. When you have a funeral, these are the people that you call first, because they'll come and contribute, and they come in their expensive vehicles and what. They need to be demonized as criminals. They're infringing on other people's rights. But we don't do that. We need to have that kind of attitude change. We need to strengthen the only institution which is legally mandated to deal with corruption issues. And I'm talking about the Anti-Corruption Commission. We really expect a lot from them, but it's like we have tied one arm and we expect them to box with the other arm. There are a lot of structural impediments that make the anti-corruption ineffective, for lack of a better term. I'm not saying they're ineffective, but there are certain areas where we think they can always do better in terms of efficiency and effectiveness.
Okay, Mr. Chiwanda, you warned me, so I'm following your instructions. It is time up.
Thank you.
I'm Emmanuel Mumba from the JCTR. What we focus on at the JCTR is to look at the government and the policies that they come with and how those policies impact on the poor, on the weak. And so we take time to read the signs of the times from a political angle, from a social angle, from an economic angle, from a cultural angle, from the environmental perspective, and then we see how all these policies that are derived are impacting on the poorest of the poor, on the weak, on the ground. So in this cloud of crisis, how is the social and economic justice in Zambia? Do the policies that we have ensure that every person is treated as a person created in the image and likeness of God? Do the policies that we have empower and uplift the lowly? Or do some of these policies deface the very image of God? And so, as we have heard from the other speakers, the political, economic, social, cultural, and environmental context of our country is very diverse. Okay? There are ups and lows. There are pros and cons. And so there are good things that are happening in Zambia. There are good things that have happened in Zambia. I think it would be unfair to say that everything is dim, everything is negative. There is a positive aspect in what is happening in Zambia. But we also have to say that there is an area of concern, an area where we feel that maybe the poor are left out, where the poor have no say, where the face of those who are poor is being defaced. Economically, for example, we have on records facts that there has been economic growth in Zambia, that the economy of Zambia has been growing by 6% in the last 10 years, and this has been spurred by high copper prices, stable macroeconomic environment, and the subsequent huge inflow of foreign direct investment. So that is a fact. It's a figure that is there, that the economy has been growing steadily for the past 10 years by 6%. So we look at that and say that is what we are being told, that the economy has grown by 6%, and it is a fact. Maybe there are figures, the indicators to show that. And we ask ourselves...
Very sincere apologies. There's a crisis in the car park. BAF1125, may you please move your car? Somebody needs to run to attend to a very urgent matter. Thank you.
So against this fact of growth, this numerical growth, we say ourselves, how has this growth impacted on the poorest of the poor? How is it impacting on the population? And we have observed that in spite of this 6% growth, there has been no direct translation into poverty reduction, especially among the poor. What we have noticed is that the cost of living has continued to go high. And the standards of living have continued to go low, especially for the 90% of the population who are very poor. And so we say to ourselves, what good is this 6% when the majority of the people in Zambia are still where they were, or they even get worse from where they were? Okay? So there is a discrepancy. And so when you say the economy is improving, the economy is growing, but the poorest of the poor are not benefiting from that economy, then that is a social and economic injustice. Because the poor are not able to get the basic needs that they need to live a decent life. And so the biggest challenge, for example, which has already been mentioned, that you have 54% of poor people and 76% living below the poverty line. And so we feel that there is no social justice because the poverty scale has not changed in any way among the poorest of the poor. And this inability of the economy to translate into significant growth has created poverty and has not allowed the poor, especially the youth, to have jobs. Okay, Mr. Wanza mentioned that millions of jobs have been created. Okay, but we do notice that most of the youth, okay, the poor youth, are still unemployed. And so this growing economy doesn't seem to be empowering the very people it is supposed to be taking care of. So that level, we still see that there is some injustice which needs to be taken care of. The economy is supposed to produce jobs and is supposed to enable these people who are in the lower bracket to have a source of living, to be able to live on their own and to contribute to the economy. On the social level, the government is on record, and we saw from the budget speech that was presented, the government is on record of spending a huge sum of money to try to improve the conditions socially in the country. So some money has been spent on hospitals, on schools, on new roads, and many areas in rural areas where they're trying to electrify the rural areas and so on and so forth. But what we've noticed is that the quality of social service provision has not improved. So people who are poor are still not able to go to school. They're still not able to go to a hospital to access good health. They're still not able to have clean water. They're still not able to have enough food to eat. So you look at the government, the budget that was presented, and you look at the figures, and you look at the attempts that the government is making to make life better for others, and when you remain on the figures, it looks very colorful, it looks very attractive. But when you go deep down, you see that the very people that the budget was trying not to leave behind are actually being left behind. And so we are saying to ourselves, what does this mean economically? What does this mean socially? For us, it is social and economic injustice. Because the very people these policies are trying to serve are not being attended to, are being forgotten. So when you look at the presentations, they appear to be in support of the people, but when you go down on the ground, the people are being left behind. The basic need basket shows for the month of February that the cost of food for a family of 5 has risen to over 5,000 for the first time. For the first time, it has hit 5,000 kwacha for a family of 5 people. And so we say to ourselves, what does this say to us when we're being told every day that the economy is improving, okay, that everyone is doing fine, the cost of living is going high, and for the poor, they cannot afford the basic necessities of life. And so we say there is something wrong, there's some injustice there that needs to be taken care of. What would I highlight as an area of concern? What would I highlight as crisis, if you like. So for me, what comes out clearly from our debate, our discussion so far, is that there is a serious concern surrounding public resource management. The figures have shown, the Auditor General's report has shown blatantly, year after year, that funds have been misappropriated. There have been some misapplication of funds. We have been following the Auditor General's report, and we have been working with the Auditor General's office year after year. And what has been disturbing for us is that the same problems that you had the previous year, you have them the following year. And I'm pretty sure that the challenges that we had, the difficulties that we had with the budget and with the Auditor General's report this year, we'll have them again in the 2018 budget.
I would like to just add a few comments on the main speakers. No, they are not questions, they are just statements. I tend to disagree that ministerial appointments are done on experience. I think we all know. I don't know what type of experience we're talking about. Is it the more you talk as a cadre to start with, the more experienced you become, therefore you become a minister? So I really personally tend to differ that they are not, maybe in the beginning, but not anymore. And I hear all these things of saying the government has made strides. Do we put governments in place not to make strides? It's expected. That's their job. They must create jobs. They must do things. There is nothing to start arguing about the government. Any government that comes in place must do things that we can see. How I wished there was a party called the Non-Aligned Party, where those young men could belong to, because they would be telling the people that are governing us the reality. They would not be polarized. You are very smart young men who should be telling the truth and not being swayed by where you are. I think that in the first world, when you have discerning ideas to the body that you belong, you do not jump ship. You resign. You resign now. To jump ship from one party to another and completely forget the party I was in was the best. The following day, oh, I didn't realize this is the best party. You are lying to us. Be very honest. We are with you. We are all Zambians, and we simply want the truth, regardless of who is going to do that truth. So we need people who are selfless, who are going to point out genuine mistakes to the rulers and be able to tell them, this is wrong, this is right. Politicians insult each other the world over. So to hear one politician say, I'll wring the president's neck, is not really something new. In higher parliaments, they tell you the honorable minister is stupid. That's it. It ends there. If a president says, I'll wring this one's neck, I'll wring yours back. Let's dwell on these very, very minor issues. Let's get the country going. And let's be realistic. Because the classrooms that are full are not just classrooms at primary. I teach at the School of Medicine. When the School of Medicine was built, they had lecture theaters for 50 students. Do you know how many students I stand in front of? No. 300 seated on the floor. Look, I'm a short woman. Yeah? So there's no one who can cheat that we have made achievements. The politicians say we need more people to become doctors. Yes, we do. But where are we going to teach them? Shouldn't we have a hall like this? If it's cut like this, who is supposed to know such things? So let's have that non-alignment, helpful views to the people that be. Please.
The crisis I see is on the paradox that we have so much money that we've borrowed as a country in excess of maybe 10 billion. And a lot of it has been put into construction works. And when we started, like 5 years ago, Zambians or Zambian contractors were supposed to get at least a share of 20% from that. And from my simple calculation, if that was honored through and through, we would have seen a decrease in the number of Zambians that are suffering now, because that's a huge amount of money. I don't know where we lost it, but because there are some people that come from the governing party here, I think we should revert to that, where we ensure that every contract that is given, there's a 20% that Zambians should benefit from. Because if you take stock, or if you go around town, you see a lot of Chinese construction sites. At Levi Mwanawasa, Avic is busy everywhere, and all these Chinese contractors are busy everywhere. But if you can, the only black people you find participating are the laborers. Black people, I mean Zambians. It's the laborers. So how are we going to improve the economic and social living of these Zambians if we don't do a deliberate policy, or if we don't even follow the policy that is already there? I think I want to request that those that report to State House or the powers that be should go back and tell them we need a statutory instrument to ensure that the contractors, the local contractors, really benefit from that 20%, so that we can enforce that instrument if we see that they are not benefiting. Thank you very much.
The first one is just correcting an impression created by Mr. Mwanza that His Excellency President Edgar Lungu gave us Zambians the constitution that we have. I think we must get it right in terms of what it means to be able to come up with a constitution in a country. President Lungu, and hear me well, President Lungu did not give Zambians the constitution. He assented to the constitution that we Zambians developed and gave ourselves. I thought that was an important point to make, so that we can all be very clear where this constitution is coming from. Mr. Mwanza, I stand here as an interested party in one of the items that you talked about. You talked about the Grand Coalition and CISCA. I think you do us all a very huge favor by telling us your understanding of how much money the Grand Coalition got and from whom. You talked about writing proposals. Tell us how many proposals were written. Because I was a member of the Grand Coalition. I am a member of CISCA. I am not aware of those proposals that were written. So I would like to hear about those proposals from you, Mr. Antonio, because you said you participated. It would be interesting for the citizens of this country to know how much was given to the Grand Coalition and by whom. Thank you.
We cannot be angry as a people. We cannot be angry as Zambians because there is too much, or there's a high level of illiteracy in Zambia. People cannot rise up. We can never be angry enough. We can never even just be angry at all because most of the masses don't know. This was announced, but the question we should ask ourselves is, how many people knew that this discussion is going on? Only those that are able to do what? Log on to internet, be able to buy bundles. People in Kalingalinga, I've got a lot of relatives in Kanyama, they've got no idea that this is going on. So how do we as a people get angry if we just don't know what's going on? People do not know how much government is spending or how much borrowing is going on because they do not know. They're illiterate. Maybe a few towns, you can talk of the provincial towns, talk about Lusaka. These are the people that know. We are the people that know. But the masses don't know. This is why Zambians to date, instead of talking of how much date we have, they're talking about Zodwa coming because they've got no idea. Look at our own roads. I'm glad the big man is seated here. We need our roads to be mended. It pains me every day to drive home. I live in Avondale. The potholes, I don't even think they deserve to be called manholes. I don't know, what will I call them? They are so huge, massive. Every day, they're ditches. We drive on those roads, and it is pathetic because those roads were done recently. Okay, but as Zambians, we can't say anything. I ask myself, is it the Lusaka City Council? Is it RDA? Does it mean nobody sees? What are they waiting for? You should just fix our roads. You know, we pay taxes all the time. Okay, I know I'm taking too long, but let me try to be quick. We heard about the land policy, Mr. Mwanza. Chiefs walked out. So I don't know what government is trying to do if the people who represent us, the chiefs, walked out. So it means it's not in good faith. So please, huh? Let me shake your hand. Do something. I mean,
and immediately wash it because of foreign.
Just want, I don't know if it is a slogan or something, but I don't know if everybody will remember that. Uwomba mwibala. I just want to point out a few things. One, from the presentation made by Mr. Mwanza, we have an excellent economic situation, we have an excellent social situation, we have an excellent political situation. Following Mr. Mwanza's word, we are just about the best in the world. The question I would like to address is, what changes people when they get into power? And I'm addressing you, Mr. Mwanza, as an individual, because of what I know you to have said shortly before you crossed over to the ruling party. Okay? You raised a number of fundamental questions, and I don't know if you still remember them, Mr. Mwanza. You raised a number of questions concerning what happened to the oil deal that was supposed to be sealed, that was supposed to bring oil, petrol prices down in Zambia. You raised questions about what happened to the 42 fire engines. This is so recently. You raised a lot of questions that put the current governing regime into serious questions, serious doubt about what they are doing for the country. Shortly after you crossed, and listening to you today, I'm amazed at the amount of transformation that has happened. So I just want to ask a question. So the question I have for you is, if Mr. Mwanza, the Mwanza that we knew only shortly ago, can transform to be what you are today, then there's no hope for this country. You're a brilliant young man, but I would like to ask the question, if there are more of you, should we have more of you or less of you? Should we have more of the people that change their minds and transform and see things completely differently when they are in power? Should we have more of you, Mr. Mwanza, or should we have less of you? What is the hope for this country?
Thank you very much. We hear in the Bible that when you see this and that, then the end time comes. I just want to address also one of the issues which my colleague talked about, that the government where my friend Antonio has crossed is doing very fine in ensuring that their community schools. Community schools are a very indicative point that the government is not doing fine in terms of reaching out to the people. When you see our people moving long distances to access secondary education, then you must know that the government is not doing very fine. When you see people collecting fertilizers and inputs in March, then you know that a well-performing government is dysfunctional and is not performing well. When you see that the high prices of oil or fuel and the cost of transporting, where our women are failing to now go out in the morning and order the goods that they sell, then we know that there is a problem in the country. And if the country has a president, then the president must be there, not just to announce that you must eat mwibala, but the president must be there to ensure that corruption, those that are mentioned in the Auditor General's report are followed. Then you know that you have a president. So those are some of the indicators of having a failed government.
The question is about, there were pronouncements about fuel to be brought to 5 kwacha 5 from where it is. And that pronouncement was very much there as a campaign tool. And people were saying, we are voting based on that. But now fuel is going up and going up. What is being done for that Saudi Arabia promise that we were given? Want to hear it.
Tonyo Mourinho Mwanza going to take the a symbol or slogan of one Zambia, one nation. I read newspapers every day. Content analysis discloses that Tongas have disappeared from the political landscape. I'm not biased, I just read the newspapers, I know what names are there. So you can't accuse me of bias or prejudice. Secondly, Antonio Mwanza, does the president ever have seen, or you ever have seen, a constitutional court that flip-flops as this one? I'm not biased. The behavior of this constitutional code of flip-flopping on the electoral petition clearly demonstrates crisis. Antonio Mourinho Mwanza, where have you ever seen a judge like Sandy Nkole, who has never recused himself and under the constant, even the directive from the Chief Justice of Zambia to recuse himself? He continued to preside over that case. Where on earth has that ever happened?
Contributed. I'll first start by addressing this notion that Antonio Mourinho Mwanza doesn't have any constitutional right to belong to a club of his choice. That I'm only your darling if I belong to your political party. And I just want to say that I exercise my constitutional right that you also do have, and you can belong to any political party. There are a lot of political parties. Mr. Muriokela is looking for members. You can join him. It's your constitutional right to belong to a political party of your choice. Let's not debate that. Okay? Now, I'll begin with, because the way these things were handled. I'll begin with Madam Laura Miti. And this is exactly what is wrong with the opposition in this country. It's about hatred, bitterness, and anger. So let us all be angry. Let us all rise up in anger and fight President Edgar Lungu and the PF government. And that is what is wrong. There is no room for anger. You don't run a country through emotions. You run a country through properly defined policies that you need to implement. Anger has resulted into wars. Anger has resulted into genocide. You don't use anger as a basis to run a country. And the Patriotic Front will not use anger and succumb to tribal hegemony as a basis to run the country. I've given an example already about 3 people that were appointed, sir. Comrade Tongas, appointed by this president. What happened to them? They were banished, expelled from their political parties for simply belonging to PF. They were expelled. And yet you are asking the president to appoint more Tongas when you expel them. That is not correct. Let us be honest. I'll go to Madam, that I always know as a tax woman, because she's been doing a fantastic job on taxes. You received a lot of money. I was there. And I'll tell you where the money came from. There were hundreds of thousands of dollars that came from an organization called Oasis that were pumped in. And the reason why the Grand Coalition collapsed was because of me. I stood up and said, we are not going to allow a situation where you are using project proposals to collect money and also using us as politicians to bring the numbers to demonstrations when you don't have members. You were asking us to speak for 2 minutes and you were speaking for 15 minutes. And you were telling us, oh, we don't want you to take the center stage because the people who are funding us don't want the politicians to be seen. I was in the thick of things. So you received a lot of money from Osisa. And when Osisa stopped funding, the Grand Coalition collapsed. They changed the name to Siska. So as we deal with real issues, with real statistics, I come from the streets. Madam Laura talked about accountability. She talked about public accountability. Let's be very honest. This country was not born yesterday. We are 54 years of independence. Since the history of this country, there's never been a government that has put practical measures to to ensure that we fight corruption other than this government? And these are the practical measures. If you do have your constitution, by the way, let me just tell you one thing. You don't fight corruption by talking tough. You fight corruption by putting up legislation that will ensure that those that are corrupt are taken to jail. And this is exactly what government has done. Read your constitution. Article 225 of the Republican Constitution provides express authority to the Auditor General to report anyone directly to the investigative wings, including DEC, SEC, and the police. It was never there since independence. This government, as we are speaking right now, has put up a comprehensive public financial management bill that they have put in Parliament to ensure that we deal with issues of misapplication and misappropriation. These measures have never been there since October 24th, 1964. These are practical measures. This is not rhetoric. This government has put up an enhanced comprehensive procurement bill to ensure that we standardize government tenders, we reduce overpricing, and ensure that there is transparency and accountability in the distribution of tenders. That has never been there from the time that we got independence in 1964. So we need to appreciate, these are facts. Don't only applaud when the statistics are on your side. That's the reason why when Fitch, when Standard & Poor's, when Moody's say this economy has improved, and when the results like the father from JCTR puts them that this economy has grown for the last 10 years, you don't want to hear that because it doesn't favor your political position. You want to change and say only the statistics that favors you are the statistics that are true. We talk about budget tracking. The comprehensive public finance management bill is to ensure public budget tracking, to ensure positive budget integrity levels. Those are practical measures this government is putting in place. And no one has said there's anything else that should be done other than what government has put in place.
2 more minutes.
We talk about decision making, please. I live in Karingalinga. We have area development committees. What development committees? We've been talking about decentralization since independence. This government has ensured decentralization is entrenched in the Constitution of the Republic. And you still ask who makes decisions? You still ask how much? Maybe because you go to expensive places where we don't go to. That's why you don't know what is going on. But the people in Karingalinga and Mtendere and Mgubud know because they participate through the area development committees. They participate through the ward development committees. They participate through their councillors and area members of parliament. So they know how decisions are made. You talked about we need to provide health. We have a comprehensive national health bill that we have put in place to ensure that for the first time we provide universal insured health to every mother, to every child. These are practical measures government is putting in place to provide health care to everybody. And you still fight it because it's coming from President Edgar Lungu, because you don't like the man. That is not correct. We have constructed, you have been in Zambia for 3 years. Let me just tell you something. You've been in Zambia for 3 years, I've been in Zambia for 40 years. No, you just said you came back in the last 3 years. No, let me finish. No, but she's attacking me, and if she wants that, we can take it.
Let me just correct the thing.
She's attacking me.
Madam, I
She's
know
attacking
we
me.
have different positions, but when we're communicating, we're not going to resolve anything if it's tit for tat. In fact, if we end our event very well, we could have one-to-one discussion so that we can tell people exactly what they think.
You should treat us with respect, not like little children. Do you know that? Talk to us like we're on the same platform. Don't talk and treat us like we're little
Please,
children.
this event wasn't made for the two of you. Yeah?
Like you mean it, right?
Please, this event wasn't made for the two of you. Yeah?
Like you mean it, right?
Let me just finish up.
Please, can I go back to my room? We'll have time to have one-to-one discussions where we have strong evidence. We cannot do everything in 2.5 hours. And let me take this chance to say, please organize such platforms. A lot of you civil society organizations, we can do this consistently, and we can then have enough time to discuss. Let us just leave this here and give Antonio a chance to finish. Wind up, please.
Thank you, and my apologies, ma'am, if I offended you. I want to sincerely apologize. Thank you. Who else? I apologize. Oh, sorry. I apologize. Thank you. Now, you talk about health. You talk about health. This government has built over 650 health posts, of which 271 are operational. These are statistics. These are facts. These are things that this government has done in the last 7 years. You talked about, no, it's important. We talked about development. We have the Link Zambia 8000. We have the township roads that we are doing. We have opened up places that were impassable and places that were inaccessible. We have managed to build hundreds of thousands of houses for civil servants, the police, the teachers, the nurses, and these are facts. These are things that are on the ground and they're obtaining. We talked about the labor market. I want to answer my sister before I leave this platform. My sister, the people that are in the labor market, the majority are young people, myself, yourself, and the people that are behind this, the people in the cameras, the people behind are young people. Yes, this government is doing a lot to ensure skills development. That's why we have moved the numbers from 1,700 skills development centers to over 3,000 skills development centers in the last 7 years. Yes, this government is committed to youth empowerment. This is the reason why the budget allocation to youth empowerment has tripled in the last 7 years. Yes, this government is committed to ensure that young people that come from families that cannot afford bursaries are given bursaries. This is the reason why for the first time in the history of this country, we have over 4,000 students that have been given bursaries at colleges and universities, inclusive of University of Zambia. Yes, we affirm that this government is so concerned with overcrowding in classes, and this is the reason why we are building more secondary schools and improving the basic schools to a tune of 278 basic schools and secondary schools that we have had in the last 7 years. Yes, this is the reason why we are building more universities. Paul Mushindano University, Robert Makasa University. I wish, and this is just an honest appeal, there were so many people that talked. Everybody was against our position. I wish I could have been given more time to respond to all the critical questions. But it seems that I will not have a chance to respond to that, and I feel an injustice. But let me conclude in this fashion. The facts have been laid on the table. The economy is growing. We have policies not to leave anyone behind. We have put measures to ensure fiscal consolidation, and those measures are yielding results. This is the reason why even domestic debt has gone down from $19 billion, 19 billion kwacha to 10 billion kwacha. This is the reason why we have more resources which are being organized and mobilized locally as opposed to depending on donor funding. I want to say thank you so much to everybody who came. Thank you to the organizers, and we hope that we'll continue to engage ourselves. If I injured anybody in my speeches, when I give the truth, I'm very, very passionate. I just want to sincerely apologize. I enjoyed myself here. May God bless each one of us. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll call upon Dr. Sishiwa. He will also take this opportunity to add some more points or even to talk to some comments apart from some questions that touched him. Thank you, Doc. Will you manage to do it briefly? Sure. Thank you.
I think the first point for me is just an appeal to my colleague Antonio. And then part in power, you should do a bit of more listening than talking, because these are the citizens you're governing. So the frustrations you see, the anger that you are seeing here suggests that there are lack of mechanism through which they can talk to you, they can reach to you, they can express themselves. And I saw you speaking. You know, sometimes it's just the posture. You don't project an image of yourself to the people as somewhat above them. When you talk down to them, I may be judgmental, but my appeal to you is, as you go further, do a bit more of listening, because these are the people who put you in power. You derive your power from them. Quite frankly, there are none so blind than those who will not see. And if you choose to say, I will not see anything that you are saying as useful, that's possible. There are good ideas that came from different people here. You don't dismiss them for saying you stay in this country for the last 2-3 years.
I thought we had past that.
And then you made a point that, you know, I'm hardly in the country. I've been here since 2015. I was out to study. When I finished, I came back here, and I'll be here. And I appeal to you and to government to take stock of the Zambians who are studying outside. Show interest in these people and try to lure them back. They are the citizens you educated, undergraduate, and make an effort to bring them back. The second point I wanted to respond to has to do with the idea that my brother raised about. I didn't talk about the petition. I spoke about the judiciary in general. A critical component of judicial independence relies on public trust. And once that relationship is impaired, then there's a risk for a breakdown in the rule of law. When you say the Constitutional Court, I'll give you an example just to show you how that trust can be undermined. You have, on a Friday, a majority ruling by the Constitutional Court saying, the petition is going to continue next week, Monday. Never mind the details about who was right or who was wrong, but let's take that as a starting point. They make a judgment. Come Monday the following day, that majority judgment by 5 judges is overturned by a simple majority of 3-2. And then, as it has not enough, they set aside the judgment which was passed. From the little I know as a layman, to set aside the judgment, there has to be somebody who appeals to say, can you set aside this judgment? We are not told who appealed, and over the weekend when they were not supposed to sit. That manner of proceeding on the part of the judiciary does not engender public confidence. There may be explanations, but in the end, when I talk about the lack of public trust in vital institutions of governance, I talk about incidences like these. When you have a president who attacks the judiciary publicly, that does not augur well, because they start thinking, is the judiciary going to act according to the wishes of the executive or not? And these are the things that I think you should, as you go back, reflect upon and say, maybe we should change the way we engage our people. Laura Mead talked about anger. People are not angry in this country. Well, the people have institutions through which they wish to be managed. It's not enough. And if we get angry, all of us, I'm sure they'll arrest us. And they did it to you. All you were asking were simply questions on accountability. What happened to you? You were thrown in jail. I had to come and remove you from there at midnight. And in the end, for me, the crucial issue has to do with those of us who are educated. We are the ones who are letting down the common man. You can't expect a man in Kalingalinga to know what the ACC does. It's not that the ACC needs to be strengthened. No. It's the individuals in these institutions. Change is not brought about by groups of people. It's brought about by individuals. It's you. It's Mandela. It's somebody else who stands up and says, no to corruption. It won't be a group of people. Stand up today, do the right thing, and we will follow you as our leader. The last point I wanted to mention has to do with the point about national unity. You said the president appointed 3 UPND MPs, and the UPND reacted very badly to that. There are more people from Southern Province who are not in the UPND. You don't have to go and hunt for Edify Hamkali to put him as a provincial minister, and then you say that's cabinet. We are talking about the cabinet as in the ministerial. Let me finish what your time I didn't interrupt you.
Please.
And this is what I'm talking about. Listen to what some people are saying. Let me just
Just 1 minute. Please, Mr. Antonio, you had the chance. He's just doing the last point.
It was a small correction. The Constitution is
and
clear.
the 2 of you can talk afterwards. Please.
The Constitution that you keep referring to has been described by your Minister of Justice as a mess. This is the Constitution you sold the people of Zambia, and you are going back to them now telling them this Constitution is a bad thing. This time, please listen to them. I've seen the Minister of Justice already saying we are going to do this and that. Is that what people have told you? And the point I was making about national unity is that don't insist on experience, qualifications. Yes, those are attributes that are essential. But the Constitution, defective as it is, gives the President 8 nominations to deal with electoral imbalances. The Southern Province is not voted for you. But reach out to them. You can find people who are not even politicians. Make them cabinet minister. If a Tonga looks at your cabinet now, I'm sure they won't feel represented. I'm not Tonga. I come from Western Province, you have the vice president there. I can say, oh, I look at there, I say, okay, there's a lodge there, I can feel represented. What about the Tonga? Don't punish them for their voting party. That's part of our democracy. And relay this message to the president that we are watching, and we feel for our brothers and sisters from that part of the region. Embrace them. Don't poach those who are already members of UPND. The reaction you got, we will visit you again. Ensure that you get those who are credible. They are people with integrity, the experience talked about. You can find them. If you don't know them, come, I will help you. Thank you very much.
Before we close, I'd just like to give some closing remarks on behalf of the Oasis Forum. Firstly, thank you everybody for coming. I think it's been a great evening. I think the audience has been very engaging. The speakers were wonderful, so thank you very much. I just wanted to say that I think what's come out is that, as Laura Miti has been saying, there's a crisis of accountability, but more so a crisis of leadership, because without leadership, our leaders will not be held to account. And the statistics show that the development is not reaching the people who need it most. Corruption is rife. And I think that I agree again with Laura Miti that people do need to get angry, because we're one of the poorest nations on earth. And I beg to differ with one of the participants in the audience who says you need to be educated to get angry. You just need to look at our history, our independence struggle, the 1980s, the late 80s food riots that led to multi-party democracy, the anti-third term bid, even Don Chikuwewa, were led by ordinary Zambians who got angry and did something. They went out onto the streets and they demonstrated. The same people, I just like to urge our leaders, as people have been saying, to listen to the ordinary people, because you just have to look over the border what's going on in Zimbabwe. The same people who were praising him are the same people who were celebrating in jubilation when he left office. So that's what happens when people get angry enough, and no one wants to get to that stage. I think it's important to mention that nobody is anti-government. We're for Zambia. And it's really important that that point comes out. It's not about hating anybody. It's not about having an agenda. It's about what's best for our people. And I want to thank particularly Antonio Mwanza and Mr. Amos Chand at the back who's come. I hope this message will be sent to our leaders in the party structures. I see Mr. Sunday Chand as well. It's really important that we listen to the ordinary citizens. I'd also just like to thank Dr. Chaitu Samba, who's been an excellent moderator this evening. And I think that all in all, it's been a successful event. I'd just like to invite the conveners of the Oasis Forum to come up and stand with me as we just about ready to launch our new logo. Father Lungu, Father Chikoya, Ms. Longwe. These are members who represent the constituent members of the Oasis Forum, CCZ, NGOCC, and Zambia Conference of Catholic Bishops, where we're hosted tonight. And we've come together to put this event together to raise awareness amongst ordinary citizens of the issues that our nation is facing. And I think I'll repeat again that our role is to promote and protect constitutionalism, good governance, and social justice in Zambia. And by launching this logo, we're signaling to the nation that we're getting ready to join the fight, not only for showing leadership in the country in terms of giving it direction on matters that affect the nation, but also to invite members, ordinary citizens, to participate in the governance of this country. So I don't know if you could just move a bit. Yeah, this is our new logo. Of course, you see the palms there representing the Oasis, and the logos of all the constituent members of the Oasis Forum. So, ladies and gentlemen, watch this space. Thank you. I'd also like to mention that there's some refreshments outside for those of you who'd like to stay on a bit longer and discuss with each other. So please feel free to join us. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. A big hand to Oasis Forum for their logo. Once you see this, you Oasis Forum. We had gathered here to discuss the issue, is Zambia in crisis? So we've now come to the end of our discussion, and I would like to thank each and every one of you for coming. It's a very busy time of the year, but you spared this time, and that shows how concerned and how interested you are about the development of this country. Again, I want to say thank you to Mr. Antonio Mwanza. I think encourage most of all the people who can participate from the ruling party in such discussions following what we've agreed. Fear has made us not to develop. Courage is the best. Come and listen even to the things you don't want to listen to. Because in that criticism, there could be some solutions to the problems you're facing. What Docs is sure. Continue and thank you. We are hoping that the knowledge that we have shared as well can be taken beyond this. When we're having tea and coffee, there are several people who want to meet Antonio Mwanza, who want to meet you. Please find time to meet them. The panelists this side, thank you so much. Your message was very clear, based on your work, based on your experience. If you all noticed no academic papers because we said, let us say what we see and what we feel. Why? So thank you very much, and we hope that we can stay on and also interact with everyone else. Oasis Forum, continue doing this work, and I think it's also an encouragement to other civil society organizations to say, apart from Oasis Forum, we can also convene such a meeting, whether it's under the tree, or in a church hall, or in a beer hall. Zambians? Okay. So thank you very much. God bless. We'll meet again. Remember, only Zambians and those interested in Zambia can